what's this? It's a different kind of thing. You can see my hands and my desk. What's going on? Well, we're talking about this thing here, the HHKB Professional Hybrid Keyboard, and why I think it might have kind of ruined all other keyboards for me. So, what is this thing? Well, I'm very glad you asked. It's a 60% keyboard with a very weird layout, or what people might think is weird. And let's just flip this around so we can see how this differs to an average layout. It's also got fewer keys. There's nothing on the left and right here. Your control key, that way around, there we go, that way around, is up here instead of down here, which means your fingers have to move less. Also, your delete key is one row down from where it normally is, and these two keys here, the tilde and pipe keys, are just above the delete. So this is originally intended for programmers, but obviously you don't have to have a programming keyboard or do any coding to use this keyboard. But yeah, the layout's different. Also, we've got a function key down here. So if we turn this up this way, we can see that on the front of all the keycaps, there's more things printed, and the function allows you to get to those things. So your arrow keys are over here towards the enter key. And yeah, actually, weirdly, it's very comfortable. And shockingly, I think a lot of people take a while to get used to this. I've actually not had much issue at all, really. Very quickly, especially with delete. Having delete here feels fantastic. You have to move your hand less to delete stuff, and already I've mapped all of my other keyboards to have their delete key, where the tilde key, well, this pipe key is normally here. And now all my keyboards have had their delete keys and pipe keys swapped around to match this because it's that good. So build-wise, it's made out of plastic, as you can see. It's very high quality plastic. It's there's no creaks or anything in that. It's very, very solidly built. It's about as premium, I guess, as plastic can feel. It's not very heavy, but not in a bad way. It doesn't feel cheap or too light. It's just nicely light. You might also notice this weird bump on the back. This holds two AA batteries, which is like, why are you doing that? And the year of our Lord 2020 something. Well, that's one of the topics of this keyboard. One of the objectives, I guess, is longevity, because if you've got a lithium-ion battery, eventually it runs out of charge cycles, it'll break, and then you have to take this thing apart to fix it. That can't happen with AA batteries because you just swap out a fresh pair. The battery's supposed to last, I think, 3 months. I've not had it long enough to figure that one out, but yeah. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't last that long. And also, in terms of how this looks, if we flip this back around again and hold it at a similar angle to which you'd see it from typing, you can see it vanishes. You don't actually see it at all while you're typing. So it's kind of a non-issue, although it looks weird when you're filming it. But yeah, longevity is the thing. So this is built very, very well. The keycaps are extremely nice. I think they're PBT keycaps, and they feel really good. They're slightly textured. And the real kicker with this thing, besides the weird layout and whatever, is these things underneath, which are, it's clicking. Let's just turn this off. Doesn't click on my machine. There we go. Boop. And it's this thing. It is the switches. It uses something called Topra switches, which are very different to mechanical switches in that they don't have a mechanical connection to make the click. They're basically like rubber domes that touch the PCB with a spring underneath to make it pop back. And they feel very different to a mechanical keyboard. Also, they are one of the most durable types of key switch. They just sort of kind of last pretty much forever. Whereas like the longevity of a mechanical keyboard is already very high, especially when it's hot swap compared to your average off the street keyboard. This is one tier up again. I know that some of these that are bought in the 90s and the design's basically not changed. Look how beige it is. Since the 90s, work just fine today with no maintenance. They just carry on going. They're very, very robust keyboards, which gets you to the kind of the elephant in the room of this thing is the price. I did not pay full price for this. I got it from an outlet store on eBay. I think it was new old stock. It came in its box. It feels like it was basically brand new. So I was very lucky, but these retail for, there's no way around it, about 250 quid. And which is an insane price, I think, for a keyboard, especially one with such technically limited functionality. But that being said, I first off paid a significant discount on this. I paid nowhere near that amount of money for this keyboard. But also it's got a few things. That longevity is part of that, right? It's not a case of you're buying a keyboard and it's going to break. This will last you literally forever. And I know that people don't break keyboards all the time. I've broken lots of keyboards. That's what prompted me to start using mechanical keyboards in the first place. I used to use the Apple keyboards. I broke a ton of them. I was breaking them constantly, probably about one every 18 months or so. It's a lot. And then I switched to mechanical keyboards, and I've only broken one since then. So that's part of the reason I think why it costs so much. And also those Topra keys actually I think cost quite a lot to manufacture. So, but yeah, you think for the amount this costs, what does it do really well? Well, the Bluetooth is a really interesting part of it because it is a Bluetooth keyboard and it can connect to up to 4 devices. And the interesting thing is it's the most rock solid Bluetooth experience I've ever had. I don't generally use Bluetooth stuff, Bluetooth keyboards. I like things plugged in because Bluetooth can be flaky. This is completely rock solid. It's the best experience I've ever had with any Bluetooth peripheral, to be honest. And when it comes to switching between those 4 devices, which on a lot of devices flakes out, doesn't always work perfectly, it works flawlessly every time and so quickly that switching between devices is almost instantaneous. It's really, really impressive. But yeah, it's a plastic keyboard. What would you expect for, that kind of money? It's probably something made out of metal, right? Well, for me, that's not actually a bug. It's more of a feature because I love plastic keyboards. So let's compare it to my everyday keyboard. This is what I use all day, every day normally. This is a KP Republic BM65 V2. And I've owned a bunch of keyboards. I'm not like a massive keyboard snob, but I like nice keyboards. And this is the one I've always come back to. I've had more expensive keyboards, cheaper keyboards, and I always, what's going on with that? That's weird. Just noticed those 2 keys are not lined up properly from this angle. Whatever. Either way, this is the one that I use all the time. And it's also made out of plastic. The reason why I like plastic keyboards over metal keyboards is although metal keyboards are heavy and look really pretty, they sound worse. And also, if they sound bad, they might not ever sound good. There's not as much you can do with them. Whereas plastic keyboards sound pretty good out of the box. And they can also sound quite different from each other. Here is my sort of backup to that keyboard. This is a Novel Keys NK65. And hear how different that is? They don't all sound the same. But you do get a better default sound quality out of them. And they're pretty robust. You don't have to worry so much about knocking them because you're damaging plastic instead of metal. And also a thing you get with aluminium keyboards is sometimes you come downstairs in the morning and your keyboard is cold. And who wants a cold keyboard? That kind of sucks. I like this because it's got very slim bezels. It's quite compact. I like 65% keyboards because you don't need a number pad because you just don't. Who uses all those keys? If you think you do, you probably actually don't, and you can get used to this really quickly and save all that space on your desk and normally have a better keyboard as well. But this is my go-to. And why do I like it so much? Well, because it sounds good. It feels great. It's made out of polycarbonate, so it's quite robust. It also has, this camera's not really lying about this at all. It has very, very, very pretty RGB. It's also very cheap. I've had a lot of keyboards that cost a lot more than this. I think the bare bones kit for this cost me £35. And yeah, it's the one I always go back to. I've sold a lot of other stuff to keep this. It uses quite well regarded switches. These are Wuche Studio Morandi switches. They're very well regarded, very, very smooth linear switch. It has been modded, so if you look underneath, you can see the remnants of some green painter's tape, which goes on the PCB, some foam in the back of here, and underneath all of this, there is also some foam attached to the front of the PCB to also enhance the way it sounds and kind of feels. It's got a very, very thick steel plate on it, and it has no flex. A thing with a lot of keyboard enthusiasts is gasket mounted boards. I don't like that. It doesn't feel very good. It just feels like it's flexing. To me, it feels cheap and it's not pleasant. It just doesn't make any, I want it to feel, good when I tap the keys. And that's the thing that really, the crux of the matter is with this thing is so good, is because it does all the things that a lot of those keyboards are supposed to do. Because you listen to it, the sound on video doesn't really do it justice. In person, it actually sounds completely fine. When you record it, sounds a bit, in person, it actually sounds really, really good. But also, the thing that all of these sound tests on the internet can't really quite capture, and the point I'm trying to make is the way they feel. Because there's 2 things that matter with a keyboard, right? The layout and how it feels to type on. Everything else is secondary. This layout is pretty cool. I quite like it. But the real thing is the way these keys feel. And there's a lot of hyperbole and whatever, and, trying to explain how these sort of things feel. I'm going to try and explain it the best way I can and how they're different. Is where these are rubber dome keys, and that rubber dome is the thing that's pushing all of the feel. If you like a tactile key, so one with a little bump in it, this has a very strong bump when you press and it collapses instantly. But also it pushes back, it pops back in a way that feels very springy and lively. is an extremely pleasant typing feel. And also the bottom feels soft. When you hit this key, the bottom, it doesn't feel like you're tapping metal. It feels very, very soft, but not in a squishy, horrible way you get with a cheap keyboard. It feels reassuring. And the thing I think a lot of people are trying to achieve with the gasket mounted keyboards is what this sort of achieves by its nature. It feels significantly better. You get what is a softer typing feel without any actual physical flex inside the board at all. There's no flex, but it's not very fatiguing on your fingers. It feels great. The way this types is fantastic. And that feeling is something I've not really quite seen before in another keyboard. Like, I've used quite a few different switches and quite a few different keyboards. I'm like a major super fan or whatever. But I've used tactiles, I've used like linears, whatever, from various different companies and different weights and stuff. These are light, but they don't feel like you can accidentally actuate them, because you don't. The sort of the point at which it actuates feels very, very natural. It feels almost effortless. And yeah, it's light and reassuring and soft. And it's just really fantastic to type on. You can type very quickly, you can type very confidently on it. A lot of people seem to worry about the size of the keycaps. I've heard that before in other reviews. Personally, it's not very different to a standard, like whatever cherry style key. I think the profile's slightly different. It's just extremely comfortable, and it is unflashy, and it just works really well, and it's designed to kind of work forever. And that feel is something you can't really convey via a video. You just kind of have to try it. It sounds stupid, but you kind of do. The way the sort of bump works is very different. It's right at the top of the thing. It sort of like pops down and it just collapses straight away. It doesn't feel at all like a tactile thing. In fact, actually, it feels like a tactile keyboard feels like it's trying to rip off the feel of this, right, by comparison. Not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but this is a certain thing going on which is very, very, very satisfying. The Bluetooth is fantastic. The build quality is fantastic. I think this thing will last literally forever. The battery life should be very good. I actually do quite like the choice of AA batteries. Also, when you get to a lot of manufacturers who are maybe less scrupulous or less careful, they'll just get like a phone battery and then just sort of solder it in, or plug it into a thing. I've heard of like people with keyboards from cheaper manufacturers or like smaller manufacturers who have lower QA standards and lower sort of competence, I guess, technical competence, and less experience. There could be problems there, right, which won't come from something like this. It's manufactured in Japan by a company that's been doing it the same way for 20 years. It's backed by Fujitsu, who own the company that make these things. So it's a major manufacturer making an obscure board in probably a moderately limited quantity at an admittedly quite high price. Although if you can get a good deal on one, seriously, if you can get them for like 100 quid, do it. They're incredibly good, at least just to have around. They have good resale value as well. They don't really depreciate either, I think. So yeah, this comes in two different varieties. There's one which is this one here, which is hybrid. There's one that isn't Bluetooth. This also works over USB-C as well. So there's a USB-C port just up there. Boop. No, this side. There you go. And there's a version which is called a Type S, which is silenced. This is not that version. It has basically some little foam rings underneath these guys, which make it quieter, I think. This isn't especially loud. It's actually quite quiet. And yeah, not very fatiguing to listen to. Everything feels very solid. I've heard that these are too loud. The space key isn't too loud. It feels great. There's no wobble here. There's no anything. It just is a very solidly put together keyboard. It feels fantastic. So yeah, in sort of conclusion, if you can get used to the layout, which is the main thing, then there's no way I cannot recommend this board. There's actually also some options you have with this as well. Underneath this little flap, there's some dip switches you can change to modify the layout. There's also some software where you can remap some of the keys. So there is some configurability with this keyboard. But basically it comes down to, can you manage having the control be here? Can you manage the arrow keys being here? It's one of those things that looks quite awful, but actually once you're used to it, which didn't take very long at all, it's actually quite nice, especially if you've always used a 60% board already. The position of these isn't actually that weird, and when you're typing, having the backspace just be here, it's pretty fantastic. Also, if you look at the layout of my existing boards, this is not a reflection of me getting this board. Things like the tilde key being over there, well, that's where this is on this keyboard anyway. In my mind, that's where this lives. So for me, layout-wise, it hasn't really made much difference to me. I have a hyper key bound here normally on all my other keyboards, so I can have an additional sort of like control key for doing shortcuts and stuff. This feels very natural. So I think maybe I've adjusted more quickly than average because there's some similarities to the keyboards I always use. I always ape that same layout as that board on all my others. So maybe that's the difference for me. I don't know. Either way, if you can get one for cheap and you're a keyboard enthusiast or like just typing nicely or just want something that you can travel with, this, to put into perspective how small this is, compared to a full-size keyboard, it's like this by this. This is very, very compact. It's very, very small. It's something you can put in a bag, take with you. You can actually put this fits in about the same footprint as the keyboard on a 13-inch MacBook Pro, for example, to give you an idea of how large this is. It's not very big. So you can travel with this. It's Bluetooth. It connects to multiple things. You could take this anywhere you want. It's light enough that you don't have to worry about it. It's robust enough. You don't have to worry about breaking it. It's just a really, really solid piece of kit. So if you can get one for a good deal, I'd highly recommend it, even just to give it a go. And that is the end of the video. And yeah, you should leave because it's the end. Why are you still here? There's nothing else. Well, I'm going to leave if you're not going to leave. All right, then, well, bye.